Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, it's a beautiful Thursday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, wet morning, I should say. The rains, goodness me.
No wonder you didn't say rise and shine.
Well, you can shine amidst the rain. I'm Ayade Okikilo and you're welcome. Well, I think the rain actually took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
We know it's the rainy season, but when it rains, there's always that element of shock. And maybe for those who are afraid of the thunderstorms and all that, there's that fear as well. And I do hope that the rain brought at least some cool and not destruction, because the last time it rained this heavy, we saw some sort of destruction.
Yeah, and I say amen to that prayer in particular, first of all, because today, you know, after every rain in the city of Lagos, is traffic. God forbid.
Ooh.
Please.
So please, you might want to take a look at, the best routes to wherever you're going this morning. Well, we're starting off on the show today with a look at the papers, but we're not doing it alone. We're joined by Mr. Dayo Akintobi, who is the editor-in-chief Today Community Newspapers. He joins us live in our Lagos studio. Mr. Akintobi, beautiful morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Nigeria.
How about the rain?
Ah, lovely.
Oh, lovely for you,
yes,
right?
Yes, it made sleep very restful.
Oh,
yes.
Not for some of us.
Let's just hope there's not much fallout this morning.
Amen, really,
yes.
Because we know what comes after the rain. But,
indeed.
Well, let's start off with The Guardian. The rain is not the biggest story this morning, by the way. It is the power sector, and that's for The Guardian newspaper. And you see, power sector, FG sinks more funds despite low performance. The irony is the fact that, they talk about rain affecting, is it the generation aspect, low water level or, perfect water level. But let's take a look at the riders in this one. FEC approves multi-billion naira contracts for electricity supply. NERC speaking for discos, a misplaced priority. Stakeholders. Repeated grid collapse pushes FG to revive $2.3 billion power deal. Experts seek involvement of states in discos and gencos. Banks will take over all discos, just a matter of time. Now, that's a quote. Who's saying that? We'll find out more details. But, Mr. Akintobi, the power sector, here we are again. Rising energy costs, but this has been on for decades. Are you hopeful that all of this activity in the energy sector will yield something?
Yes, as always, we have to continue to maintain hope. But since 1999, the amount of money that's been thrown at that sector, and it seems that the more money you throw at it, the less performance you get. So it makes you begin to wonder and analyze that. Is it a money problem really? Or is it more of administrative issues? Is it the structure of transmission, generation, distribution? Is it the existing structure that's a problem? Is it the players in the sector that were not well assessed and chosen judiciously?
Because the president alluded to that in some sense.
Yes, indeed he did, because he ultimately said the government is going to be looking very closely when it comes to time for license renewals. I know there is an existing deal with Siemens in Germany, and we've started to see some of the outcomes of that arrangement. There's some transformers and power plants that are on the way to the country, and ultimately you see a lot of activity in the sector, and you hope it will bring about an improvement. But Nigerians are really undergoing a tough grind in terms of power supply at the moment. So whatever can be done to bring relief is a welcome development.
Because if you check the monthly costs of businesses in Nigeria, energy costs take like a huge chunk, more than half of it. So imagine you take that off, and I'm talking not to discos and the usual one. It's to generating sets and alternative power supply. So clearly this is something we need to get ahead of.
Well, people won't mind to pay for power if they can get reliable, uninterrupted power supply, especially businesses. They will happily pay whatever is necessary to get good power supply.
I'm tempted to ask you if you believe in all the theories that, some people don't particularly want this sector to work, because clearly if you're not buying power on the grid, you're buying off the grid, and people are making money that way.
Yes, I know, but I think that's a conspiracy theory taken too far. I believe that at the end of the day, it's more beneficial to everyone if we have seamless, on-grid power. And even the people who are making money off-grid will also benefit from seamless on-grid power once it gets up and running.
I hope they know that for sure. On top of that one, you see Fayemi Amosun-Wajiba entry swells APC presidential aspirants. It's a season of politics, and well, 100 million naira is not deterring some people from going ahead. We saw some people you didn't quite expect picking up the form first. For example, the Minister of State for Education. Well, okay, not picking up the form, and this is a point we raised. It was picked on behalf of him and presented to him by some people. But what do you make of all of this, really?
It tells me we're not a poor country. If we've got 14, 15, 16 people who can cough up 100 million naira each, especially when you look at the odds, only one person out of 14 or 15 is going to make it through. So essentially it means your odds, your 100 million naira, the odds of it actually paying off for you is 1 in 14. If you ask the odds makers, that's very poor odds. And what that tells me is that the people who are putting up this money, I don't think they really worked for it per se, because on 1 to 14 or 15 odds, you don't gamble money away like that. Yes, they're saying, well, the money was put up for us by supporters, it was gathered by this, but people who really worked hard for their money and sweated for it, they don't squander it. Ask Dangote or Adenuga or Tedola if he would put his money on a 1 to 15 chance.
Well, Mr. Akintobi, that's the interesting thing. I was watching an interview with Dangote, and he said that, you know, they've had to support candidates during elections, and he said it outrightly. So, hey, I think people do that anyway.
Without a doubt, but what I'm saying is some of these candidates have no chance whatsoever. First, seriously, first of all, even what moral right does the Minister of State for Education have coming up to say that he wants to run for president? What has he done? I think part of the criteria we use to assess candidates is their achievements, their track record. In that man's ministry, ASU is on strike. He hasn't been able to do anything about that. Teachers remain unpaid. He hasn't been able to do anything about that. Can you now imagine him actually becoming president of the country, and what kind of a shambles the entire nation will be in when he hasn't been able to manage even ordinarily a ministry? How can we expect him to have the whole kit and caboodle and do anything with it?
Don't forget he is Minister of State for Education. There is a Minister of Education.
Without a doubt, but he still has responsibilities. And that office, the buck stops at the table of the leaders of that ministry. So you can't excuse, just as he would take credit for the successes, he's got to share in the credit for the failures as well. So I will assess him by his performance and say he has failed. So how can he now be aspiring for us to trust him with more responsibility?
Again, Mr. Akintobi, I'm tempted to ask how many people you can count now that have the moral
Can you please
right
cut down on this temptation this morning?
No, because I mean, for a lot of people, especially in government, you can't divorce them from a lot of things happening, either in the opposition or in the ruling party. So, are you saying that majority of them don't have a moral right to actually seek a re-election, or in this case,
I'm saying that a key criteria for determining electability or suitability for higher office is your track record. Whether in the public or in the private sector, you have a track record. What are you standing on? What are you offering the people? How can we determine your suitability and the kind of a president you will make, if not by assessing where you are coming from, the things you have done in the past, and the promises you are making for the future? Remember, promises are just words. They're very easy to throw out. But how do we, what gives us the assurance that the things you say you will do, you will actually do them when you get into power, beyond the fact that we look at your record and your history and the positions you've taken on issues in the past? Even as Minister of State, if you're saying he doesn't have substantive power, he has spoken publicly, he has taken positions that enable us to assess his state of mind, his competence, and his ability, which is a key criteria for us electing suitable leaders.
So there you go. By the way, he actually spoke about the ASU strike as well yesterday, so you might catch that on our YouTube page. And before we flip over to the next one, 14 years on, Lagos Airport awaits runway lights to end blackout. You can't make some of these things up, but let's leave that. It's the Guardian newspaper.
Well, Mr. Akintobi, you talked about what's that word again? Things that you have done before, and things that some things you can't take them to court over. They're not justiciable, right? There's a justiciable story on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Electoral Act. Ngige Wajiuba opt not to resign. Of course, you know that's a vexed part of the law. Constitution permits aspirants to resign only 30 days to poll. Question is, which poll? That's ascribed to Wajuba. And there's a second one. Section 8412 of Electoral Act has been struck down by court as ascribed to Ngige. And guess what? Party aborts resignation notice.
Interesting. This one about this Electoral Act is murky waters, really. In fact, the argument is now the law is an ass. The argument is now tilting on the definition of a political appointee, because they're essentially saying that ministers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria are public servants and not political appointees, even though they were appointed by the president. And so Section 84 does not apply to them, and they don't have to resign. They're also now backing it up by the ruling of a court, I think in Umuahia or somewhere, that basically struck down that part and asked the Attorney General to expunge it, and which has not been done. So where do we stand today as it is? APC has in its own guidelines what its candidates or its aspirants should do, and that gives 72 hours from today for them to resign or be disqualified. So the onus has now shifted to the party.
And the party, according to this front page, party aborts resignation notice.
Well, so it's saying, the party is saying they don't have to resign and they can carry on in their positions. The thing for me about it, I think it speaks to why people are in office in terms of what is the overriding factor. Is it public interest or is it self-interest? Why is it such a big deal? Most of the people who are complaining about this have been in office for 7 years. Now all of a sudden they are worried that if they resign now and they don't get the ticket, they lose 1 more year of being in office. So what is the fantastic thing you're going to lose from not being in office for the 8th year out of when you've already done 7 years? Is it because the public is going to be so diminished by what you've not been able to do for them in the additional 1 year that you are not able to do in 7 years? Or is it because there's something in it for you that you need to achieve in that last 1 year?
Questions? Well, there's a story right under that one. NLC fumes over FG's silence on prolonged varsity workers' strike. That story is on page 25. Doesn't seem like NLC is appeased by the Minister of State's comment.
Clearly not.
Well, they've now said no work, no pay. So that has ramped this thing up to an even higher level, because all of a sudden you're here fighting about emoluments. The whole purpose of the strike to begin with was because the terms and conditions of service were not salutary to the academic staff workers' well-being and welfare. Now all of a sudden they are now in a double whammy situation, because now you're not getting paid while you're not going to work. So it's actually worsening their situation. So the federal government has upped the ante, and it's quite possible that might force ASU to the table, because I'm sorry, without your pay and without your work, without your salary, I'm sure the government has looked at its terms and conditions and has the legal right not to pay. But nonetheless, I think they've tried the carrot approach, and now this is coming down with the big stick.
Do you see that happening? Do you see federal government being able to hold that position and say we will not pay? Has that ever happened before?
Historically, these things always get resolved at the end of the day. However you look at it, there's going to be some give and take from somewhere and from somebody, whether it is the threat of not paying, or whether it is the clamor from the public that our kids are sitting at home for too long and are becoming idle and intellectually ineffective, whether it is various factors. The point is this gets resolved at the end of the day, but how much collateral damage has occurred in the intervening period? That's what we need to look at and try to avoid.
Mr. or Mrs. says, okay, Mr. is talking to Mrs. I love you so much. I feel like putting you in an armored personnel carrier whenever I'm going to the office. And Mrs., looking lovingly at Mr. says, oh, that's so romantic. But I prefer a bullion van.
Nice one. Money is a great motivator.
Yeah, so especially if you want to buy forms.
Are you saying Mrs. wants to run for office?
What?
Well, she doesn't have to pay 100%.
But don't forget there's a campaigning process. But hey, That's Mr. and Mrs. this morning. Let's turn our attention to the Daily Trust newspaper. And it's consistent with some of the things you find on the front page of the Vanguard. Disqualification threat, how APC guidelines put Amechi, Ngige, Malami, others in tight corner. Aspirants have 72 hours to resign. I'm not aware of new rules. Labour Minister Wajuba pays 100 million naira for presidential form. So, that's something we have talked about, and we'll see how this one plays. We have a few days to find out, maybe longer anyway. But there's something, it seems we have moved on from, and it's still a very present sore. 30 days after, government yet to rescue Kaduna train attack hostages. It's been a month of trauma, victims' families. And you see, do everything to release abductees, Colonel Dangiwa. Again, it's been said, another failure of government staring us in the face, and it seems some people have moved on and forgotten the plight of those abductees. What do you make of it?
That incident is still 30 days old. You're talking about moving on and forgetting. How about the Chibok girls? They're still not back. How long ago was that? And we've forgotten about it. But I saw
not forgetting the daily counts that Daily Trust usually has.
Yes. Some papers and some media houses are still tracking to keep it in our consciousness. Still tracking.
Baptist High School.
Yes, Bethel as well.
98 days after.
Yes, indeed, unconscionable. But it's a cruel alignment of the elements that on the very day that we see the photographs of 65 or 62 or thereabouts hostages still being held from the Abuja-Kaduna train attack, that on that same day we hear the Senate deliberating on an amendment to the terrorism law that says that it will now be a crime to pay ransom to kidnappers to get victims back. And I'm looking at the pictures of the people who are in detention that the government has not been able to rescue, and I'm putting myself in the place of those people's family who are pleading and saying, we want to engage directly with the bandits to try and get our family members back, because so far government has not been able to rescue them. So we want to take matters into our own hand and begin to engage with them directly and see if we can find a way to resolve this. So you now hold that against the fear of the fact that, goodness, even if I can engage with them and come to a meeting of the minds with them and agree on a sum and pay, there's the hammer of the government now on top of my head saying I will now do 15 years in prison for rescuing my family member. So you ask yourself, which is more important? It looks like they put the cart before the horse here. Shouldn't we make our law enforcement people accountable? How about the ones who have failed to prevent the kidnapping, or the ones who have failed to rescue the kidnapped? Why don't we put the hammer of the law on top of them rather than on the anguished family members who are trying to do the best to meet up for where government has not been able to grant them succor? So I think it's a misdirected, a wrong-headed law by the Senate, and my heart goes out to the families of the abductees, and I pray that government throws more resources, because these kidnappers, they're not spirits, they're not ghosts, yes, they don't exist in isolation.
There's also that argument of trying to discourage the terrorists or bandits from kidnapping for a ransom, if they know that in any case. That's another argument. But when you say the elements align, that story is actually on the front page as well. NAS criminalizes ransom payment. So there you go, the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. By the way, the picture is right there. Yes. Of the victims of the abduction. Really sad.
Sad one. Very sad.
Well, at least gratifying. It's a bill, not yet a law, right?
Right.
Okay. Let's just hope that government has listened to you this morning.
Listen to the families of the victims, listen to their anguish, and act accordingly.
The Leadership newspaper is asking certain questions. Well, it's not a question, it's a headline. Presidential screening. NDLEA wants drug test for Simbajo, Tinubu, Amechi, other aspirants. Writes APC leadership, says PDP aspirants, others to follow. Yaya Bello Wajuba pick 100 million naira nomination forms. Amoson to declare next week. Amechi meets Southeast delegate in Oweri. Here we are. NDLEA wants drug tests for Simbajo, Tinubu, Amici, other aspirants.
I ask myself, are we really serious in our own dear native land here? Are we really serious? I mean, first of all, what is the NDLEA's own? Yes, it's to fight drug crime. But how can it insinuate itself into the political process? If you want to say the entire country should undergo drug testing, I don't think it is the NDLEA's brief to create standards for political aspirants. I think that is an overreach.
Pardon me, to be fair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the NDLEA gave reasons, right?
Yes.
It's not just for aspirants, even for appointees as well. And they said that, I mean, it's simple.
Yes.
One, we don't want them to use public funds. You know, if you have...
That's not the NDLEA's remit. It's not its business as to what public funds are used for.
If you have an addiction, Mr. Akintobi, you know how people go. So they don't want them to use public funds to purchase cocaine and the rest. That's one. And they want them to act right. You know, sometimes when people are under the influence of drugs, they don't act right. I imagine the policies that will come out of someone who's under the influence.
Let each person keep to their area of specialty. It has nothing to do with the NDLEA's brief, what political appointees do in office.
But it's a counsel from NDLEA to the parties. It's a counsel.
The parties can make it as part of their requirements for their aspirants or their candidates.
That's the counsel. It's not a directive.
I understand, but I'm saying they don't even have the place to give that directive. It should be the party that you say, look, to present ourselves as above board to the Nigerian people. Let us create standards for our people. It doesn't have to be drug testing alone. There are various standards. Say, for example, how about public declaration of assets? Why don't the parties make that a requirement? Because that speaks to character. That speaks to things that matter to Nigerians more. So it's not, you can't isolate. Yes, NDLEA might think is giving a directive, but it's a violation of every fundamental human and constitutional right of every single political aspirant for... Absolutely. Yes, indeed it is.
Sports, sports players and the rest, they
because
have to go
that gives you an unfair advantage against your competitors. So if you have a steroid in your system, you can outperform the people. So it's no longer a level playing field.
But if you have drugs in your system, you can underperform.
You will underperform.
Exactly.
You will underperform.
That's the
which
reason.
Is to your own detriment.
Which is that's the leadership newspaper this morning.
Well, let's turn our attention to Nigerian Tribune. This one, Afenifere advocates government of national unity. It's a page 2 read, and quite interesting proposition. We heard the senior advocate Afe Babalola earlier talking about an interim government by the National Assembly, and now this. What do you make of all these propositions, especially regarding the Constitution, regarding carrying people along and ensuring that there's a sense of togetherness? Did you think this is the right way to go, perhaps?
What it says is that there's problems with our structure, the underlying structure from the ground up, from the Constitution up, and that we're coming into an awareness that we need to tweak the structure some kind of way, whether it's devolution of powers to the states, whether what they call restructuring, whether it is even going as far as going back to a parliamentary system, because we know the presidential system is too expensive for us and it's not working. So I think the general sense now is that the system we're running at the moment, it fosters disunity, it discourages inclusion, it alienates people and certain segments, which is why you're seeing all this agitation for secession and self-determination in pockets across the country. So when you hear Afenifere saying the same thing, Afe Babalola saying the same thing, and you juxtapose it with some of the secessionary agitations, you look at it and you see a common thread running through all of it, which tells you that people believe we need to rejig our structure in such a way that fosters greater inclusion. The exact measures which we will take are open to debate.
And I think that's the major debate right there. A couple of other stories, but let me give you this one again. I mentioned it yesterday. COVID-19 still around. FG1. So, you can't say I didn't tell you. It's right there. Okay, so second day running, page 12 read, because there's a sense that we've since moved on from that one.
We have heard you.
You've heard me, right?
I can't hear. No,
I'll be back tomorrow. Well, so many stories on the front page, Mr. Akitobi, but we have to anchor at that point. By the way, FG moves to weaken power of ASU is also there. Financial autonomy being worked on for universities. Nigerians spend 1.6 trillion naira annually on tuition abroad. ASU. Goodness, it's a page 8 read, but we have to anchor. I mean, it's been an interesting conversation with you, taking a look at the dailies this morning. We'd like to thank you, Mr. Dayo Akintobi, the EIC, that's Editor-in-Chief, Today Community Newspapers. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure to be here. Good morning, Nigeria.
Oh, lovely suit, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's a look at the dailies, but we're just scratching the surface, as it were. We're back in a moment with the issues for the day, and we're starting off with what concerns you and I: food, agriculture, and the economy. So please, stay with us.
Food. There's an African saying that once you remove food from poverty, you significantly solve the problem of poverty. But I guess that's one of the things that the AFDB is acting on with this prediction that informs some decisions, that Africa may lose up to $11 billion worth of food as the bank envisages a fertilizer crisis as AFDB, which is expected to affect food production by 20%. Where's all of this coming from? Find the details in this conversation that we will have just now with Professor Oyebanji Oyelaran Oyeyinka, who is Senior Special Advisor on Industrialization to the President of AFDB. Thanks for joining us this morning, Prof. It's good to see you again. Well, first of all, it's scary enough that we had a food crisis before the Russia-Ukraine war, and many people are ascribing more or perhaps worse situations on our hands if the war continues the way it is. And of course, the AFDB has been speaking quite loudly about that. But to lose food to the tune of $11 billion and a reduction in food production by 20%, that's quite dire.
Indeed.
What, can you speak to us about that? Perhaps, yeah, many people
thank
are
you
wondering.
for inviting me here.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. No, this it's a convergence of crises, as you know. Africa is just overcoming the crisis of COVID, overcoming the crisis caused by the crash in oil prices for especially oil-producing countries, and equally for all the other countries who experienced the break in the global supply chain during the COVID. And now we have Ukraine-Russia war, which, as you heard the statistics, these two countries combined export close to 30% of all the wheat, maize, and soybeans to around 28 regional member states of African countries. So it is the making of a perfect storm for us. And this is why Dr. Akumi Additional actually proposed this emergency food production program for Africa. In fact, the bank is the first to come up with a very comprehensive program on this to combat this food insecurity. And, you know, there are several components which we can talk about. But the overall goal actually is to ensure that we meet this head on. Those figures are really very frightening, considering that COVID itself threw millions and millions of people already under poverty. And you know that whenever you have increase in food prices, inflation in food prices, the poor are the most vulnerable. They are the ones that are first affected. Of course, these days, there's very little distinction between the poor and the middle class in Nigeria, for example, and in many African countries. So we need to meet this challenge head on. So this is what the bank is doing, and this is why the visit to the president in the last 2 days by the president of the bank to actually brief the country. And let me say that Nigeria has been extremely concerned. The president of Nigeria has actually been making inquiries, asking about what is going to happen with this and how the bank is going to help. So as you know, there was a recent IMF World Bank Spring meeting in Washington, from where the president came, and all the finance ministers of Africa actually met on this issue. So it is a serious crisis. It is really the beginning of a perfect storm. But there are mitigation measures.
Well,
if we take those mitigation measures very seriously, I think we'll be able to really attenuate the impact.
Well, you know, Prof, one of the challenges that we can cite as people who have been in the country and who have seen the way things run over time is that whenever we always have emergencies. And when we have emergencies, we deal with them as emergencies, and almost right after that, we're back to where we were, and of course that situation that we averted previously is going to come back. Now, talking about food, we have had conversations around our food production capacity over the years. So there are so many things that we have left undone over the years. Now, we're talking about a food emergency production plan now, which we'll detail in a bit. But what's the assurance we have that this emergency food production plan will actually help us not just to get out of the danger zone or the waiting perfect storm that you've talked about, but to actually have a sustainable program post this emergency?
No, thanks. Actually, this is really the plan. As you know, in the past, what normally happens is that a country or a region falls into this kind of crisis, and you have World Food Program and all of those aid agencies come, distribute grain, distribute corn to people to mitigate those immediate effects. But the plan, the Emergency Security Food Plan that the President has put in place is designed to actually be sustainable. What do I mean by that? What you see here is a 2-year program and 2 seasons, both wet season and dry season planting, that will be consolidated thereafter. The idea is to ensure that Africa becomes a global food basket itself, and not just beyond this emergency. And as you know, in the past, I've spoken a lot about the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone. There will be a consolidation, properly done, properly implemented. Once we get all of this right by thorough coordination, ensuring that we build all the infrastructure that we require for the farmers. As you know, there are almost 70% of our population. The idea is that this will trigger rural industrialization and consolidate it with the special agro zone. So I really like your question, because this goes beyond the current crisis. And by the way, all the projection we see is that all of this is not going to end very soon. What the Ukraine-Russia crisis has triggered, some project it to last up to end of 2023 before we even begin to see some level of normality. Because as you know, for example, a lot of supply chain has been broken because all of those corridors, the Black Sea and all of those areas where food comes from, where energy are transported from, gas pipelines. You see all the argument, for example, now between the Europeans and Russia. They are all going to add to the cost of insurance, and they transmit immediately into prices of food. So this is not going to be a short-term crisis. This is an external shock that has a potential to generate longer-term impact. So we have to respond on a longer-term basis and provide sustainable, deep-going solution. And this is the way the President sees it. Seize the crisis, seize the moment. And this is why we are providing the global leadership on this. In fact, the bank is the only one that has actually come up with a plan such as this. And colleagues all over the world, they recognize it, what the President has done to put on this. And it's getting huge support from all the big partners.
Well, Prof, just to be clear, when you say president, I'm always tempted to think president of Nigeria, but I imagine you're saying president of the AFDB. Am I right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
So let's talk
I'm talking
more.
about president of the AFDB.
All right, so let's talk more about this emergency food production program set to be worth what, $1.5 billion. By the way, it's been said that it's waiting to be approved by the board of the bank, but it holds so much potential, and I think a lot of Nigerians, Africans at large, and perhaps the world, will be waiting to hear at least the details, the much you can give us. So tell us, is this a Nigerian thing, or as the name connotes, an African thing that would involve farmers across Africa? Can you break this down further for us?
So it involves all of Africa. Actually, the restriction from caused by the Ukraine-Russia war and the inflationary trend that you find actually affects almost 28 African countries. So all of these countries have been targeted for this $1.5 billion emergency food plan. But of course, we were explaining the Nigerian component of it to our Nigerian president. The Nigerian component is going to be about $140 million. And by the way, since last year, we've actually been working on an emergency food security program due to COVID. It's called NEFSI, National Emergency Food Security Initiative. So those two actually merge now with the bigger global program. So the idea is to target about 5 million farmers to provide additional 9 million tons of food, grains, maize, rice, soybean, sorghum, and of course wheat during the dry season. For the wheat, for example, this is a big concern because Russia and Ukraine, between them, provide almost 30% of all global grain wheat supply. And beyond that also, there's also the issue of fertilizer. Prices of fertilizer are risen like 3 times because between those two countries and Belarus, which has become almost an ally of Russia, for example, is also another place where you find fertilizer coming from. So all of the inputs into guaranteeing food security have been affected. So the food plan is actually addressing all of them. Inputs, fertilizer, coordination, and high-yielding varieties of all of those food crops that I mentioned. So the Nigerian component is what is being articulated. Is almost $200 million when you add what we have from the NEFSI to it. And I hope that properly and urgently implemented. And by the way, you mentioned the idea of the board. The hope is that before the end of May, this will be approved and it will be rapidly deployed in all of the African countries, not just in Nigeria. But of course, the meeting between the two presidents, the AFDB president and Nigerian president, actually was to discuss the Nigerian aspect of it, because the federal government has been extremely concerned about it. Because when you have hungry people, you have angry people. We already have the lasting impact from COVID. We haven't been able to go get rid of it. Now this comes along. So I think any responsible government would like to really see the end of this. At least let's mitigate it as much as possible, especially for the poor people. So because anytime you have high food prices, the poor suffers.
Absolutely. And I see what this is about. So there's a perfect storm, as you have put it, but there's a possibility, there's this potential to rise above that storm. In fact, ride the storm, essentially. And I love the proposal, maize, sorghum, soybeans, in fact, wheat. But, I mean, we've had, and you know, I hate to take this back, we've had programs, I mean, lovely programs, and, you know, targeting the right kind of people, farmers, targeting the right kinds of crop, the right kinds of problem that we need to solve. But how do you plan to operationalize this? Maybe learning from the previous ones we've had, maybe not from the AFDB, perhaps from, you know, governments and all that. What is going to be different about this one? Or let me just say, how will they be operationalized? How will the farmers be selected? What kind of support will they get? And for how long? If this is between $140 million to $200 million, just how long is this going to be? I know I packed a lot, but I know you can unbundle it for us.
Yes, indeed. You know, you are right, because we know that programs like this, where it unravels or where it succeeds is at the implementation stage. So the way it is designed is that it's mostly going to use for procurement of inputs, fertilizer, heat-resistant varieties of wheat, for example, drought-resistant varieties of grains like rice and maize and all of that, and to use technology. If you remember very well, when Dr. Akinwumi Adesina was here as minister, the so-called GES that he operated was based on an ICT-based system, a platform that puts into the hands of farmers directly the inputs. So the way it used to be operated was that the federal government will use part of this money, for example, to pay part of that. I don't want to use subsidy, but it's a growth enhancement sort of scheme. So the federal government, this money, for example, will pay, let's assume 25%. States will pay, say, 25% as was done with GS, and then the farmers will pay 50%. So effective subsidy in the hands of farmers is that you only need 50%. So you mitigate that cost, the additional cost that is coming out of all of these shocks that we have. So this is the way it's going to operate. It's going to be directly into inputs, and we've had several discussions also. The National Food Security Council, which is headed by the President of Nigeria, we've had discussion with them on how best to make sure that this is effectively done, because it's going to need a lot of coordination between officials, agro dealers, the farmers themselves, seed companies. And the good thing is that we have experience in this. We have experience in this, unlike the COVID problem, where the country wasn't prepared, just like many countries wasn't prepared. For this, we have experience. It's been done before. When Dr. Adesina was Minister of Agriculture, it's been done, it was tested, and they produced at that time 21 million tons of additional food. So I think we have the experience. If we rally together as a country, coordinate together as all the big stakeholders, I have no doubts in my mind that this can be done. So it needs leadership, it needs focus, it needs vision, it needs collaboration of all the key actors. So asking, say, how can it be done? It can be done. Let me give you an example. This same wheat program was started here. It didn't work at that time. But in 2 countries where it had been experimented, it's called Technology for Africa Agricultural Transformation. It's headed by my colleague, Martin Fregene, and his team. In Sudan, they supply 65,000 tons of seeds. And the Sudanese were able to grow over 300,000 hectares in 2 seasons. They were able to reduce their food sufficiency by 50%. And it is projected that that country in 3 years will be a net exporter of wheat. Same with Ethiopia. In the 2019-2020 season, Ethiopia produced 1.1 million tons of wheat using the same technology, using the same model by the bank. So there is no reason, scientifically, when something works somewhere, you can make it work anywhere. This is it. So if it doesn't work, then it's a problem.
I like this perspective.
The issue.
I like the perspective you bring in, Prof. But, you know, there are 2 sides to this conversation, really. So there's the emergency food program. There's also the special agro-industrial processing zone, which is meant to, I think, cost about $540 million. And I'll take a quick detour here. We'll still get into those issues. But I kept thinking $1.5 billion for the African food production, emergency food production program, $540 million. I don't know if they are linked, but the quantum of that funds alone is huge. And I know for the special agro-industrial processing, program, you have support from, other banks. But the FDB is like the giver, or do I say the lender that keeps giving. Where are these funds sourced from, essentially? I know this is basic, but it's a question that nags my mind as well, because this is huge, and this is something you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah. So, you know, all of the African countries are member stakeholders of the bank. So if you're a stakeholder, those are the benefits of being a stakeholder of the bank. You know, these are concessionary long-term loans. They are very cheap loans. So it is not difficult to imagine that countries will want to have this kind of access to these monies. So for the special agro zone, for example, is a multi-decade loan that is being given to the country. As we said, it's about $540 million. We have, like you said, we have other partners. The bank's component is $210 million. IFAD, 140, Islamic Development, 170 million. So it speaks to the fact of partnership and the fact that people trust the bank. And we have other partners already lining up. And I should not forget also that the Bank of Industry is also a partner at the local level that has promised to fund all of those key actors who will locate in those zones. On the special agro zone, I've spoken with you on this on several occasions. We have already concluded everything. The rest now is in the hands of the government of Nigeria to fast-track the implementation. Some of the states, of course, have taken it into their own hands, and they are already negotiating with the contractors, which is a very good thing. Oyo and Kaduna, for example, have already approached some companies. They've signed agreement to start. So it is a good thing, and we are hoping also that from the government we'll have a new date to launch this project. As whether they are linked in one way, for example. If we do this emergency program very well, as I said, over the next 2 years, and we get African countries to begin to produce to ensure their own food security, then SAPZ becomes the consolidation mechanism, in which case you now become a processor, a value-adding continent, rather than a raw material exporter.
This merge, this bridge that you just talked about now, it takes me back to the question my colleague asked earlier about operationalization of this emergency plan. Now, you have told us several times that the SAPZ is government-enabled, private sector-driven. So I'm wondering how the private sector is coming to play now, if it still has to be activated, so to speak, by government.
Yeah, so the government-enabled portion is what has happened now. Government asks the bank for a loan to build infrastructure across these states. We have 8 zones, and then we have 14 additional states already lining up. So government enabled it by asking for this loan from the bank, because Nigeria government, for example, is the biggest shareholder of the AFDB. So it has access to AFDB. So it catalyzes the process. And that is a good thing. But the success of a zone, you just imagine a supermarket. You build a supermarket, or you build a Hilton hotel, for example. The success of a Hilton hotel is that you have 100% occupancy rate. Or you build a huge supermarket. If nobody comes to that supermarket to take the shops, then you fail. So this is why we sort of agreed with the government that these zones are going to be world-class built, they are going to be quality built, we are going to ensure good governance so that they are managed properly, so the construction and the management will be world-class. And this is why those states, for example, approach those entities. I don't want to promote anyone here, but the kinds of companies you want are those who have done it before. Those particular countries they built in Togo, in Gabon, and other places, and they are working. So we want to make sure. So the government as enabled is a catalyst to say AFDB has a model. We want this model. and we'll put financing behind this model. And by the way, even in construction itself, one of the reasons we want to ensure transparency is that we also want private sector actors to be part of those who will own it, who will own those zones, okay, in addition to managing those zones.
Okay. Yeah. Now, that is understood. But is it the same template for the emergency food plan, this $1.5 billion 2-year plan?
Yeah, so the template for the emergency food is an ICT platform. As I said to you, it's almost akin to the growth enhancement scheme that Dr. Additional started in those days, whereby you ensure that these inputs like fertilizer, high-yielding varieties, and all of those things, they reach the farmers directly in a very transparent way. And this is what we need to ensure, that you don't have middlemen profiting from poor farmers. You don't have middlemen profiting from fertilizer corruption.
Yeah.
You want to ensure that this goes directly.
How will it get? Is this something that the federal government is going to champion itself, or there are some agencies of government at the federal or state levels?
So it is a combination of government and private. The ICT platform and all of that are going to be run by some private entities. The government, of course, you need the government because it sets the policies. The government will be also as I said, a catalyst. But running this program will be the farmers, both smallholder farmers, smallholder farmers, medium enterprises. Those are the real beneficiaries. And we want to ensure that they are involved in all this coordination. There's actually a national, you call it a national wheat innovation platform that involves all of these actors. They have been meeting based on the original one that I was telling you about called NEFC. So it is an open platform where everybody is involved in suggestions, in bringing ideas, and all of that. I know the public is always worried that the money will go into the wrong hands, but we are also wanting to ensure that these inputs go directly to the farmers. Otherwise it defeats the purpose.
Well, I guess you answered the question before I asked it. But there is one other issue that a number of people always worry about, so to speak, and that is post-harvest losses. So just, I think it was late last year, we had from the Action Aid, for instance, that Nigeria lost up to 3.5 trillion naira worth of harvest, post-harvest, because for one reason or the other. One of the reasons that's been adduced is the logistic of transportation, to the point that some people are even suggesting, let's use tricycles to move food from the farmlands into the city centers and all of that. And then, but that's up from 25% in 2020, according to NSPRD or so. So I'm wondering, how has the AFDB been able to think through this particular challenge as well of logistics, in order that the efforts of production made are not whittled down by post-harvest losses?
Yes, indeed. In fact, this is one of the frameworks designed into the SAPZ. For example, the SAPZ is not your usual special economic zone where you have only factories. Factories built maybe around ports or some airports where you import the input. For example, if you are making garments, you simply input cotton and yarn and then process and export out. Now, the special agro zone, the special agro-industrial processing zone is deliberately built within the peri-urban areas. And this is where you have all of those post-harvest losses. The idea is to move it closer to where the farmers themselves are. Because without that, so you have those factories within those peri-urban areas, and then deep within the communities themselves. And this is a unique feature of the special agro zone. We are also going to build what we call Agri Transformation Centers, which is ATCs. ATCs will comprise, for example, drying facilities, cooling facilities. It will include roads. It will include, for example, logistics that you talked about. So that, for example, if someone produces cassava or some perishable, and the likelihood is that after a few days there will be the possibility of that going bad, you have a drying facility or you cooling facility or whatever it is that we identify as the particular commodities that is abundant in those particular areas. So each zone is designed in a very, very specific way to address that. In fact, you have put your hand on the major problem of post-harvest losses. And it's not just losses of income, it is losses of trust. If you ask farmers to produce more, and they produce more and then they lose all their produce and harvest, next year they're not going to listen to you. So we are going to put in place all of those that will help them to mitigate those losses. So within the ATCs, in fact, some ATCs actually for themselves, almost like a hub of processing. Then from there, you can then move to factories that will do the end production.
Right.
So those are the thoughts that go into the agro zones that we have designed, because this is very, very peculiar to our situation.
Right, so still on this agro-zones, I'll move on in a moment, but just to clear this one. So in the tweets put out by the president of the AFDB, talking about the visit to the president and how, the bank has mobilized $540 million, of course, in partnership with IFAD and the Islamic Development Bank. And, he talked about 7 states, Kano, Kaduna, Oyo. By the way, you talked about those 2 earlier. Ogun, Kwara, Imo, Cross River, and of course the FCT. And there are questions that why isn't Benue, which we all know as a food basket of the nation, at least on that list? Some would think maybe first that list for its prominence in terms of food, agriculture, and all of that. So I'd like you to perhaps shed more light on that. Why is Benue excluded?
Yeah. No, Benue wasn't excluded. In the beginning, we had engaged with practically all the states, and we had constructed something called a readiness index, because you need several documentations, for example, your feasibility study, environmental study, and all kinds of things that are required by these banks, all of these 3 partners. You need to have them ready after your expression of interest. Some states were faster than others. Some were a bit slower. But what we decided, after a time, we also lost 1 year because of COVID. We started the process in 2019, April, when President Buhari actually asked for the special agro zone. So we saw that we were losing time. And of course, also you don't have that quantum of money to cover all the 36 states. So we took a decision, okay, let's start with the first 8 who have met the readiness index. So that's what we did. As I said earlier, there are 14 or 15 other countries, including Benue, including Katsina, Nasarawa, Kebbi, that are now lined up for phase 2. So they are also going to be included. SAPZs are going to be built in all of those states. And this is why we are in a hurry to begin to implement the first set. And I can assure you that, when private actors see what we have done, as it's happened in Ethiopia, in Ethiopia, they now have about 24 industrial parks, industrial zones. Many of them are agro zones. Half of them are actually privately built. So what we are doing is actually exemplars of what is possible. And I have seen farms that, I was talking to a particular entrepreneur. I was so impressed. What he told me, this man is actually building a dam. And I was telling him, what you are doing here is actually almost like an SAPZ. So we are going to hope, and we are hoping that once folks see these first 8 set of states and then we begin to build the other states, private sector people can build their own special agro zones. I know there are enough people in Nigeria who have the money, who have the capacity to do that. So Benue is not excluded, no state will be excluded.
And I think it's good you clear the air on that one. And just to reiterate the point you made earlier, that, I mean, it's now the ball is in the court of government. I mean, you have essentially done all you can, so waiting on government. But, you know, all of this talk is even making me interested in farming, because I'm thinking $540 million for the, you know, processing zones, and a potential $1.5 billion, maybe $200 million for Nigeria particularly now. So I'm thinking now as a farmer, how should farmers position themselves to partake in all of this? I want to call it largesse, but of course it's meant to be used for business and agriculture. So how can they better position themselves to partake in this?
So basically, once all of this starts, this is going to be open. So any farmer, whether you are doing maize, whether you are doing soya beans, whether you are doing rice, particularly wheat, we really want to encourage farmers to grow more wheat, because of now we have all of this heat-resistant, climate-adapted wheat variety. We want Nigeria to become a net exporter of wheat. We want to ensure, because all of the bread and cakes and all of that you eat, it takes a lot of money out of this country. We really need to stop that. So farmers should position themselves to be part of this. We are encouraging everyone to be part of this. At the state level, we're going to be doing a lot of advertisement. Yeah.
Well, we're hoping that, you know, the communication will get to the right people. Prof, yes or no?
Yeah.
Is agriculture capable of fast-tracking Nigeria's economy?
Modern agriculture, industrialized agriculture, is the only way to start an industrial revolution.
Okay.
That is how you start.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof.
It is capable of fast-tracking our growth, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to get that out for those who, well, they know themselves. Professor Oyebanji Oyelaro Oyeyinka, Senior Special Advisor on Industrialization to the President of the Africa Development Bank. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. So how are all these things going to be fast-tracked? It all starts with leadership. And that's next. Stay with us.
In a chat with State House correspondents, Governor Ayade reveals his presidential aspiration.
The truth is that my approach to the president is different. I will support the president's candidate. Even though I'm on standby, if I'm available, if I'm my choice, I will support the president's candidate. And the president says, you are not outside of my view. Go, I give you blessing, go and consult. Ensure that you engage with key people while I watch. So I think it's a clear indication that I have the right to go and try it, to go and declare. So I will.
In a question and answer session on contesting potentially with the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, if he joins the APC and becomes the party's flag bearer, Governor Ayade says he has respect for the former president and that if it is the decision of the APC to field him as its candidate, he would support him.
This conversation today, and we're keeping to our promise. Joining us live on the program this morning is Professor Ben Ayade, the Executive Governor of Cross River State, now presidential aspirant of the All Progressives Congress. Joins us live from Abuja. Your Excellency, thank you for joining us on the program. Well, I'll begin from something you said. It's good to have you. Something you said right there when after you visited the president, and you said that yes, you're on standby, but you have a right to declare for president. So just to be clear, are you or have you declared your intention to run for president?
Yes, I have declared my intention to run for president. Also, the standby status was before meeting the president. Having received the approval from Mr. President, I am fully on the race as an aspirant as it is today.
Well, we saw some of your colleagues, fellow aspirants, pick up the form. Some, it was delivered to them. That was yesterday, the 100 million naira nomination form and expression of interest form of the APC. Have you done that?
Well, I know I have a lot of supporters. They're all working up together to see how that can be done almost immediately. I am sure that I will do that in the course of time.
Okay, so essentially, you're not taking out the money from yourself. You're depending on people to purchase the EOI and nomination form for you.
That's politics. Yes.
But does anything stop you from taking the money from your pocket or from your account this time around and purchasing it?
We're talking about a contesting an election for the office of the President of Nigeria. You can't do it alone. You can't. So you must have a team. You must have people who see something good in you that are encouraging and supporting you. And that's what is required for you to be able to pick that form.
Well, how confident are you, Your Excellency, that those people will come through for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely very confident. Very confident.
Okay, so yesterday we were talking about your antecedents in office, and I think that's a great place to start because we're on the verge of another election or leadership recruitment process, so to properly put that in perspective. And Nigerians are looking to recruit the right leader who has the right qualities, the right solutions to solve the problems, the myriads of challenges we're faced in the country. So what makes you think you're that right leader with the right solutions for Nigeria?
Well, I'm the right leader because I know very well that the Cross River State that I run today was beset with a lot of challenges. I came in when for the first time in 7 years, the state is having steady salary and pensions without recourse to prolonged and protracted delays. I understand clearly also the issues of poverty because I was born into a very humble background. Having conquered poverty in my private life, in my corporate and business world, before moving into politics. Having served as a senator, having served as a two-term governor, I'm heavily weaponized with all the experiences that is so required. Experientially, I've achieved so much in the state to demonstrate clearly that I understand the challenges of running this country. Judging it against the background that Cross River State was basically declared almost insolvent before I became a governor. So I have no access to loans. So struggling with my bare knuckles to drive a state with over 4.2 million people, as it were, is quite challenging. So I know what it takes to come to the national, where I have sovereign power and sovereign authority, with the vast natural resources available to the country, with my understanding of 42 ways of doing business without money. I think I'm properly equipped to really tackle and address the issues of this country.
Well, one of the issues that a number of people have pointed to is, what exactly, just as our guest said earlier, what a man will do by what he has done before. And there are those who will point to maybe one or two projects in Cross River State that you promised that would be done maybe within a year, and some of them are still waiting for completion. So I don't know how you would confirm or affirm to people that I'm the right person for the job. For instance, there are those who point to the spaghetti flyover in Cross River State, and they're wondering, after like 2 or 3 budget cycles, the project is still waiting for that long-sought completion, just for an instance.
Well, I wish you, as you were speaking, you had a picture of the spaghetti flyover at this moment. The spaghetti flyover was also a standalone project. It had its connection with the Calabar-Odupani dualization of the federal road, for which the federal government said they would not reimburse us. But they had a lot of bottleneck at Odupani Junction, so you can't get into Calabar. Sometimes you spend days. So I decided to do the dualization of that project and then have a spaghetti flyover across it. The dualization has been completed. It's part of the spaghetti flyover project. The major abutments of the spaghetti flyover has been completed as well. So we're on the wing walls, and at this moment, the wing walls are at finalization stage. Percentage completion of the project is about 92%. Let me explain something to you. Are you aware that just a month back, our allocation was 34 million naira? The month before then was minus 171 million naira. Are you aware of the allocation of Cross River State? Then if you know, relative to what others get, then you call me a magician.
Well, seeing that, you know the financial status of Cross River State before all those, the promises were made in 2018, and then with the affirmation that by maybe 2019 or 2020, the project, that particular one, would be completed. And there have been a couple of, the deadline, so to speak, has been pushed one or two times. So you knew the financial status of Cross River State. And so I'm almost certain that you weren't only waiting for that allocation. There must have been some other things, as you said, some other ways of doing business without money that, you had tried to champion. So I'm wondering, how is that a factor?
I don't understand. Can you show me where I gave a deadline that this is the date I will finish spaghetti flyover and the Odupani dualization? I have completed the Odupani dualization.
Okay.
Go and see.
Is that to say that there is no deadline?
Don't go and, you want to interview me, you go to social media to pick up.
No. Your Excellency, let's just speak to the facts.
It's all done.
Let's just speak to the
So
facts.
why did I promise it? Listen,
okay.
I promised, listen, I made a promise and I'm committed to that promise. And I'm driven by my vision. I am not limited by the financial challenges, in spite of the fact that I've done the analysis for you. Obviously, if you get there to the site today, you see that it's a done deal, completed work. And by the side of it, you have the 6-lane superhighway, which is at Stone Bay stage already, with an MC work being applied by this week. Separate from the dualization of the Odupani. You see, what people don't understand is that if you have a budget provision for, like, say, 18 billion, for the spaghetti flyover and the dualization of the Odupani Road, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have all of that 18 billion in one budget cycle. So if it moves to the next budget cycle, you didn't shift the date. I only provided for it in the budget, and if it's not met, I move it to the next budget cycle. It doesn't mean that I had a deadline in the budget that I must finish it this year. It's quite sad the way people understand budgeting system.
Okay. Your Excellency,
the important thing is that the project is completed.
Okay. So you're saying that the spaghetti flyover, the entire project is completed now, Your Excellency?
Yes, the Odupani dualization component of it is completed.
Okay.
The component of the spaghetti flyover is at 90%. Because it's there physically for you to see.
Okay. So is it, are we to expect use from 2023?
That should be used to 2022.
2022, so it's fully completed by 2022. Yeah. Fantastic. Now, Your Excellency,
of course.
There are a number of questions that people will be asking about what the next president of Nigeria should be focusing on. You have listed 3: security, economy, and power. And these are issues that we have dealt with consistently for many years. Power, for instance, we have been struggling with this for many decades. Just a few months ago, I saw a headline on the front page of the old Daily Times newspaper pointing to power solutions are going to be done with this year. Maybe that was in the 70s or in the 80s. Economy, we've been struggling with economic policies as far back as the 80s, from the austerity measures of 1980, 81, 82, to the structural adjustment program, all kinds of policies, first years, FEM, and all of that. And today we still have those issues. And security, of course. It's something that is gaping. What are you bringing to the table that we have never used before?
Okay, thank you. Be a little patient with me. Let me start with power. The electricity challenge of this country is very, very frustrating. The solution will be simple. You have to regionalize this country and develop a solution that fits a particular region. Today in Nigeria, we have a massive Atlantic coastline from where we can use hydro technology as a way to produce electricity to serve the whole of this country. There is a superhighway master plan that connects Calabar to the northeast. And on that northeast axis, you can have your transmission line that runs directly from the Atlantic Ocean from Calabar and terminates in Borno with a spur to Kano. You can have another major turbine from Port Harcourt that draws electricity through yet again another superhighway that connects maybe again to Kaduna, and of course, one from Lagos to Sokoto. On these lines, you can properly run your transmission line. The structure today, we have a vertical mercantile structure where government holds the monopoly of the transmission system. And because of that monopoly, and because of the partial risk guarantee by World Bank, people begin to realize that if there is a failure in the transmission line, the generating companies will continue to get their payments. So there is a deliberate effort to disrupt the transmission line in order to keep them in business. So what you need to do, if I come in as president, first of all, I take the Niger Delta, for example, South-South. I provide you a specific power structure that generates and redistributes in a ring-fence structure within the captive structure of the Niger Delta. And it doesn't have to be owned by federal government. I can get in Siemens. Can you go and put your hydro turbines and drive me electricity that feed the Niger Delta? Then I can go to Lagos, put another turbine, maybe call in Alstom or call in Solar, call any other company. In UK today, you have EDF of France supplying electricity in the UK. So you don't, I think this pattern we use for the telecoms should be applied even in the case of power. If we have 6 major power generation and distribution companies, make it fully independent and let them only pay royalties to federal government, you will find out that Siemens or GE or Alstom will be able to run their systems and generate electricity. Kano, Jigawa have a massive deposit of silica, best candidate for the production of photovoltaic cells. So you put solar energy there, put solar farms, concentrate them in lithium batteries as a master farm, and now generate and distribute electricity. Change most of our consumption structures and reduce the amount of energy being consumed with the old-fashioned equipment we have in the course of time. And this is what we need at this time. Subsurface underwater current is a major source of electricity that Canada has developed to a very huge success. If you go to Germany to say, state of Bavaria, almost everything has turned to mini hydro. About 4,000 mini hydros generating electricity. Everybody is moving away from gas to power. We're still struggling to do gas to power. Gas should be used for nanotechnology. Gas should be used for export, for nitrogenous fertilizer, ammonia production, and what have you. I mean, there's too much renewable energy available for energy generation. The problem is that federal government is carrying the burden of power. Decentralize it into the 6 regions and have the 6 regions advertise it and have 6 different multinational companies generate the electricity, transmit it, distribute, collect tariff, and also pay the royalty to the federal government, as well as the states. 2, on security. Security has a very huge international dimension. And what's the dimension? Nigeria has so many essential elements, trace metals, and metals of economic interest. So the solid mineral deposit has become a source of challenge for the nation. The international community, locally and across the whole globe, has an eye. Nigeria has a massive deposit of tantalite, which is like coltan. They have lead, they have zinc, they have gold, uranium. The deposits are so huge. And most times in Africa, once you have such deposits, it's just an invitation for crisis, because They'll keep you unsettled so that they can do the exploitation. What you must understand is that, I kept saying this, if President Buhari was not a president, the security situation of this country could have been worse. But because you don't trace it to the historical background of where we are, you will never see how much he has done. The collapse of Afghanistan means that ISWAP, that believes that West Africa is their own God-given province, who are desperately looking for how to wipe out all the residents in West Africa today, including Christians and Muslims, because they believe that the Muslims in West Africa, as it is today, with their Western education, are infidels just like Christians. So they have a policy to occupy West Africa. And with the collapse of Afghanistan, they now have access to power. They have a sovereign nation called their own, and they deal on drugs, sell those drugs to raise funds, buy arms, and prosecute a huge war. This is what President Muhammadu Buhari is facing. So if you don't know it, you say, okay, there is an attack, and you accuse the president. But that attack, even if you look at southern Algeria, it takes over 30 years. When you have a guerrilla attack of that nature, it takes over 30 years to wipe them off. But in this country, at a point in time, we had Boko Haram flags on certain lands of Nigeria. They used to be bombing in Abuja. All that has been addressed.
Well, Your Excellency, we're due for a break
Nigeria has
in about a minute. Pardon me, we're due for a break in about a minute,
yeah.
so I just wanted to give heads up. But just on the point you made, I've seen you try to draw a nexus between, mineral resources in Nigeria and insecurity, as well as the fall of maybe Afghanistan and others to the insecurity in Nigeria. But you also said that, again, you repeat that, security could have been worse under the president. So in about 30 seconds before we go to break, is that an admittance first that indeed security is bad now? It's not worse, but it is bad. No. You met a very challenging situation. President Muhammadu Buhari made a challenging situation, held it, and been able to pull back the terrorist attacks. And you judge him based on one occasional incident. And I'm saying, if he was not there, it could have been worse than what he met. But he has made a lot of improvement. You are not noticing because it is the normal human nature. If there is one single isolated incident, it's celebrated. Accumulate them all against the danger, the potential that ISWAP has so much capacity today. Boko Haram linked to Al-Qaeda, ISWAP to ISIS, all targeting Nigeria, their mineral resources. Jesus Christ. It is because people don't understand the international dimension of this security challenge that they dismiss it as if it is a Nigerian issue or it is a leadership issue. It is a global issue with the focus and attention on keeping Nigeria unstable. And so you need some international strategic and security connection to actually address the issue. It's far beyond the president and capacity of the president of Nigeria. It must be something that the nation must cry out to the international community and seek sophisticated digital non-contact warfare to be able to address the challenge. All right, Your Excellency, we'll go to break now, but clearly so much to still talk about, so please stay with us. Well, let's continue our conversation with His Excellency Professor Ben Ayade, the Executive Governor of Cross River State. Well, still on the issue of security, I mean, it's been 30 days since that attack and eventual kidnap of passengers on the Kaduna-Abuja train and a lot of other incidents, which you are well aware of. And you said that we need international support. We need to get, hands on deck from outside the country, since this also has an international dimension, clearly saying that more works need to be done in that area. So how can you get that support, that help that this government has not been able to get enough of? How would you achieve that?
First, let me draw something that is so shocking to you. If you look at a country like Tanzania, if you look at countries like Democratic Republic of Congo, what is their crisis? Massive copper fields, massive deposits of coltan, and they are perpetually kept under tension by the international community because there are international communities that are interested in those their natural resources. Nigeria is just extremely lucky by the capacity of the sitting president. The manipulations of our natural resource to become a source of our disadvantage is very huge. And if you check what happens to African nations, once you have natural resource, it's a source of your crisis. Either you have an Ebola virus coming after you, you have HIV coming after you. There's an international conspiracy that is so orgasmic that what is required of this nation is a unity between the led and the leaders. It is not sitting there and pointing fingers. 21st century illiterate points at challenges. The modern educated man is value addition. So back to your question, how do you get international support when the source of your problem actually has an international connectivity? That complexity requires the sophistry of the president to know how to pussyfoot and know where and which country to actually have its own strategic alignment. Today, if you go to places like most of these Northern African countries, young men are being hired at $120 a month to come into Nigeria and kill. So much that some of the locals begin to depend on terrorists to protect them. Like the kidnap that you just saw in the train, are they not releasing them for a ransom? So even the locals are beginning to say, hey, wait a minute, kidnapping is a better trade than trading on cattle. So there is a sociological disconnection between the historical trade of a people and the version of trading with human beings for money. So if selling one cow or selling 3,000 cows will not give me the money of kidnapping 2-3 children from a school, why would I continue to be in the atavistic trade of moving from one place to the other? Same thing applies in the South. If kidnapping by militants gives them more money, why do I suffer to be able to say I want to go to the farm to grow better seed? So there's a restructuring of our mentality occasioned by ease of getting money because of the infiltration of Nigeria by most of the people who have come in as terrorists. So the bandits developed in the process, leading to kidnapping, while the terrorists who have a bigger philosophy of taking over West Africa. So we are being attacked from two prongs. One, drawing its basis from Al-Qaeda to Boko Haram and ISIS to ISWAP down to all of them targeting Africa. But at the same time, they are fighting each other. So Boko Haram fell because of the collapse of Osama bin Laden.
Right.
Boko Haram collapsed because its leadership became weakened, and ISWAP is stronger and trying to wipe out Boko Haram. Well, so they come into Nigeria and say, we have surrendered. Well, in the process, they get assimilated into the country. Right. And because there is no major source of livelihood, banditry sets in. I'm trying to give you this.
And I really like the background.
And the cause of the crisis.
I like the background you're creating, Prof. But so we can, I mean, you said that this should be solution focused. And I mean, the background provides a lot of insight. Yeah. So let me try to restructure the question. If you today, I mean, you've had meetings with the president. If you today could advise President Muhammadu Buhari as regards security or insecurity in Nigeria, saying, President, I think this is where we should lean, what would that advice be?
First, I will congratulate him for even being alive to date, because I know that every West African country that has this amount of mineral resources, the president is a target. I gave you an example of a country as a good example. So if I am not in a position to advise my president, unless I am being asked to do so. At this point, I would prefer to tell you, what will I do? Because
asking you to do so, hypothetically speaking now, Your Excellency.
So ask me what I can do.
Which is what we're doing. This is hypothetically, if you were to advise the president on security.
If I was the president, if I am to be president, the president sitting is an army general, and I want to restrict my sociology and understanding of African respect, that I'm not in a position to give him such advice, particularly in the public. Let me say what I would do if I become president of Nigeria on security. First thing, I would recognize the fact that the non-contact war is the conventional way to go today.
All right.
you need to generate the people's army. He needs to understand that you need to embrace technology and bring in technology to bear. You need to have a satellite positioning system that allows you an infrared spectroscopy into what happens within this our theater of war across the northern hemisphere of our country. You must also have a situation where you can have a direct attack without using human contact, which means you have to employ the technology of drones, like the Turkey technology. You have to also realize that Israel and Turkey combination, who are not directly involved in the crisis of Nigeria today and who are not beneficiaries of our crisis today, can be good partners for discussion because it is real. That is why you must realize that there are certain countries, if you go to discuss with them on Nigerian issue, they will never listen to you because they are beneficiaries of the crisis we've got. There are small countries that have high impact technology that we can benefit by hand-holding us through the process of dealing with these issues. But to dismiss guerrilla tactic warfare and terrorism of this nature and reduce it to the inefficiency of a government, it will be abusing ourselves because it shows that we have not understood the dimension of international terrorism that has infiltrated Africa with a deliberate intent to reduce Africa from being a civilized continent.
Well,
because
let me bring in
Africa
this dimension.
1.3 billion people in a market,
right.
1.3 billion people, and they have so much natural resource, 65% of their population within the age of 35 years and below. A very green population, massive natural resource deposit. If Africa finds technology, Africa will lead the world. So
well, let me bring in this dimension.
I don't want to mention countries. There's a national program. There's an international program. Africa is the biggest market for Europe and America, and Africa must be kept as a market. So you can't allow them to find their feet. So there's an international dimension that is far more complex.
Right. So let me bring in another dimension, because you talked about Turkey and maybe countries that have experienced similar issues. And Turkey, for example, I mean, the president was in Nigeria months back, and he made statements about a certain group, which he said, well, they consider that group as a terrorist group, and saying that they have operations in Nigeria. But that particular group, for example, is not recognized as a terrorist group in the EU or by the EU, UN. In fact, the head of that group stays in the US as I speak. So that's a very tricky part. So, for example, you want to have collaborations with Turkey, but then Turkey is saying, well, there's a group within your country that we see as terrorists and we need you to perhaps clamp down on that. But in the same guise, the UN, EU, which we have a relationship with, the US, don't exactly see that group as a terrorist organization. So that dimension, how would you tackle that, for example?
Well, that is part of the complex security nexus. And that's kind of subject for which I have a detailed solution to an answer to that, but it's not a subject for television discussion.
Right.
Indeed, I think I want to be careful so that I don't reveal too much.
Okay.
I also have to be safe.
I'll let you go on that one, because safety is very key, Your Excellency. But, you know, these solutions which you have talked about, you've had the opportunity as a senator, I mean, since 2011, now as governor. And, I mean, these solutions which you speak about, I imagine you should have brought them to the table either as a senator on the floor of the Senate, as a governor at the different levels, is it NEC, is it NGF, or as a governor in your state, perhaps try these solutions. So to what extent have you tried to bring these solutions on board as a senator, as a governor, and what do you have to show for it?
Well, the solutions I have prescribed for Nigeria are of international dimension. For Cross River State, I have a local solution. The local solution I adopted in Cross River State. Cross River State is in a borderline between Cameroon and 4 other states, and perpetually at war with both Cameroon and these neighboring states. 32 illegal land routes into Nigeria, into Cross River from Cameroon. Some parts of Cross River speaks the same dialect with some parts of Cameroon. So when they cross, you will never know. We have over 68,000 refugees in Cross River State. The Amazonian conflict is raising a lot of young men to be able to fight Cameroon. So you can see the crisis that I am dealing with. Cross River State has, if you fly from Calabar to Obudu, you are still in the same state. 7 hours journey, you are still in the same state, stretching from the Atlantic coastline to northern Nigeria. So I give you an idea of the security challenges of a state that I run. Unfortunately, Calabar became the recruitment ground for the Amazonian people. So you now have small and light weapons proliferation within Calabar. And to make matters worse, we also have a maritime boundary. So the Gulf of Guinea is awash with this piracy, and all of them draw their social life out of Cross River State. That's the amount of tension, in summary, to tell you what I'm dealing with. To manage it, I expanded government and placed people on a social welfare program of 30,000 naira per month, a massive number. I decided to expand government to create opportunity for people to earn income even if they are not working. People don't realize that it's a security strategy. They mistake it for a political strategy. If it was, I have no election to run, I would have stopped it. I've been doing it for 8 years. But that security kinematics and ebuloscopy that I've been able to manage, occasioned by the fact that I've put food on people's table, has really helped dramatically. You will know it when Ayade is out of office. Now, it is difficult for you to sustain a payment structure for people who basically are being given money to be able to lower down tension. And to do so, it means that you have to have a steady source of income. But please check your records. I have a monthly deduction of about 1.8 to 2.2 billion every month from the state allocation. So whatever you read as an allocation of Cross River State, you have to subtract that figure. So how is this a security approach? By putting food on the table, I reduce the animalism which is in every one of us. You and I, we have our negativistic instincts, which are not manifest because our environment provides opportunity for us to feed. But when you are pushed to the world, you will see that there is a level of criminality in every human being.
Well, Your Excellency.
In order to minimize it.
My apologies. Please land on that point.
Yeah. Yes. In order to minimize it, I've decided to expand government and make sure that a lot of people earn salaries, even if they are not working.
Okay.
By this process of doing that, you will see that Cross River is safe. Number two, we set up Cross River Homeland Security. The Homeland Security has a maritime component and has a land component. And we have Operation Akpako. And all of them are properly funded with the support of the Nigerian military, the police, the civil defense. Together, we work as a team, including the Air Force that does the occasional raids for us.
Your Excellency,
to keep Cross River at peace. Go to the police. The statistics shows that Cross River has the safest state, in spite of the fact that when federal government provided for the protection of the oil pipelines, Operation Delta State was set up across the whole of Niger Delta, except Cross River State.
Yeah.
So Cross River became the safe haven for all these people.
That challenge in Cross River State by 36 plus 1. That's what you would have to deal with as president. So you have to, that means you have to have operations for every state and perhaps every locality. Now, you've talked about what you have been able to do in Cross River State peculiarly to checkmate security by reducing poverty as much as you can. But the challenge of poverty isn't just going to go away by just one strategy. You have also spoken to the fact that a lot of the security have to do with one economic reason or the other. By the way, you haven't really spoken to the economic part. We'll come to that shortly. But how do you alleviate poverty in all the 36 plus 1 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? You know that the federal government made that promise, was it 2018 or 2019, to take 100 million people out of poverty over 10 years. We have been trying to get the figures. I mean, by now we should have about 30 million Nigerians out of poverty. We are looking for those figures. Hopefully the federal government will be able to supply those figures to us. But we do not know whether we have up to 30 million Nigerians pulled out of poverty over the past 3 years. So in terms of eradicating, or as the woman leader said yesterday on our program, reducing poverty to the barest minimum, what's your plan?
You cannot wish away poverty. Poverty, you have to have a structural and normative framework to deal with poverty and tackle it headlong. It's by creating jobs. It's by the resurgence of the middle class, which has been exterminated in the course of time. You can only achieve this by creating basic jobs that put food on people's table. And you cannot do a social program for a nation that is having challenges with its own dollar incomes. Therefore, if I become president of Nigeria, my #1 focus will be on tackling the issues of unemployment and reducing youth rest. How do we achieve this? I give you a typical example. If you set up 6 regional centers to develop 6 new cities like Abuja was developed across the 6 regional centers. And so if you go to South-South, you have a capital of South-South. If you go to North-East, you have a capital of North-East. All of them will now come to Abuja as the capital of the country. When you attain a cityscape like in Dubai and pick up a city which is already designed and the people are ready to invest, you do nature for equity swap. And they come in and start developing new cities, for example. Lawyers will be employed, architects will be employed, food sellers, surveyors. Almost everybody will have a job to do. It's keeping people busy. It's not even enough to put job on the people's table, but they have to also be physically busy.
Your Excellency, you just
because
raised
time is not on your side.
Yes, just a quick one. I think you just raised a constitutional or political conundrum, if I can use one of your words there, which is the fact that you want to regionalize the country. How does that work with the states on the one hand, given that some of these regions may not all belong to the same political party?
No, I talked about estate regionalization, not administrative regionalization. I'm talking about moving a country from third world to first world in physical development. I'm talking about creating opportunity for people to work. I'm talking about the advanced application of Keynesian theory that will make people dig holes and get others to close the hole. I'm talking about advanced application of Ayade theory to allow opportunity for people to deliberately work, even if it's not the essential focus of government, so that in the process, people have opportunity. So while you put food on the table, you put their hands on the plow.
I imagine that you've had at least 7 years now to engage this Ayadesian theory, perhaps another level, a Nigerian version of the Keynesian theory, I imagine. But still, unemployment rate in Cross River is the 3rd highest in the country. It's higher than the national average of 33%. It's at 53% in your state. And I think this is where we can now anchor on the economic angle. And the question is, seeing your performance in the state, I mean, they say you can judge what a man will do by what he has done. So on the one hand, the performance in your state, but then it's always said that Cross River has vast, potential in tourism. The Obudu Ranch, for example, there's been complaints that, traveling from Calabar all the way to Obudu takes such a long time because of a stretch of road, which is bad. You plan to actually construct that over 200-kilometer superhighway. So I hope we can do this in less than 2 minutes, but can you respond to the concerns about how well you've been able to transform the potentials in Cross River State for good, saying that unemployment is still high?
It is sad that you take about 3 minutes to ask a question and you want 2 minutes to give an answer.
Thank you.
That's the tragedy you find yourself. You are talking to me about tourism. My stomach is full of tourism. You're talking to me. So how do I start? But let me summarize. The access to Obudu Cattle Ranch is a big challenge. Today, I have an airport in Obudu being constructed, a brand new airport, which is a cargo stroke, a passenger airport of international standard. The entire airport we've done, 23 meters cutting to get to levels. But that airport will be ready, God willing, this year, maximum Q1 of next year. Please don't believe me. Just send somebody to, just Google it. You'll see the pictures physically. Because Nigerians must learn to put and enjoy themselves in this country. We can't keep exporting our money. So tourism and using the ranch is right. If you see, the ranch has been advertised for concession to international operators of tour programs. So with the Obudu Cattle Ranch that I'm developing and renovating, alongside with an international airport in Obudu, giving it out to an international tour organization, which is the program I have in place. It's been advertised already, I think on the 6th of this month. The advert is out asking for people to express interest in running and operating Obudu International Airport along with the renovation of the Obudu Cattle Ranch to address the issue of tourism, to also address the issue of the great opportunities that are van and the unemployment issue in Cross River State. I set up factories. Garment factory is out, is there, is working. The pharmaceutical factory, instant noodle factory, Kalachika, the feed mill, the rice seed production factory, the cocoa factory, the vegetable oil factory. Most time when I say this, people say, are they producing? Are they working? And I laugh because I sympathize with myself. One man is trying to create an industrial platform where a state has been traditionally a tourism state and focusing in Calabar with over 70% of rainfall, making it a wrong candidate for a tourism center. And I'm struggling to bring people from the issue of pleasure of dancing and carnival and trying to let them know that industry before pleasure.
Well, Governor,
and I struggle to
Governor,
set up factories.
I think I've been fair enough.
I set up factories
with my timing.
I set up factories.
Okay, you can land on that one.
And
yeah.
I'm also expected to operate the factory. A government cannot operate factory. I can only catalyze the factories into existence. I have to evacuate them to private sector by way of concession because I swore that I would never sell a government asset. And that's what I owe. Today you have Cali Air. I have 2 aircrafts on the ground. Those 2 aircrafts are to support the Obudu Airport to be able to support tourism. Every local government has an industry feeding into the superhighway that empties into the Bakassi Deep Sea Port. I had a master plan, but I can't kill myself. I spent 2 years on COVID-19. I spent 3 years in court to get approval to do the superhighway. And then you turn back and say, oh, you've not done this because you promised it. Please, spare me. Please look at my passion and my vision.
And I think that's a great place to anchor. So I've been fair. At least it took less than a minute to ask the question, and you took 3 minutes at least to respond. So,
thank you.
But
thank you.
Clearly, it's been an interesting conversation, Your Excellency, and we wish you the very best. We've been speaking with Professor Ben Ayade, the Governor of Cross River State, and now presidential hopeful. Thank you for your time this morning, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, let's hear from you now. It's time to take the feedback.
This one from Kenneth says, race for the presidency. That's the first one. My take on the race for presidential ticket is that I'm worried because the scenario has again stagnated governance in the entire country, Nigeria. I hope at the end of the day we all have that good leader we've been yearning for. May God bless Nigeria. And I say amen. Amen.
We'll take a look at this tweet from Olagunjo Oladele saying, winning an election is one thing, running a government amid a polarized political environment is quite another. A president is only as good as a team he or she assembles. I like that. He or she assembles to administer a government. Politicians are known to appoint a team based on loyalty instead of competency.
Just this last one, Professor Imona Enakena says, our political elites must create wealth from the abundance of human and natural resources that abound in Africa by investing in SMEs, especially commercial agriculture, by cutting interest rates on borrowing to single digits to encourage private sector investors.
So much messages, so much mails and tweets, but that's so much we can take this morning. We appreciate them. We appreciate you as well. Thank you. That's been the show. I'm Kaide Okikiolu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. God bless Nigeria.